Jai Hind and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Aadi. Something all of us have noticed that the narrative against India is suddenly starting to pick up. I wanted to get someone's perspective who studies this particular aspect of the Western narrative very closely. Mr. Shree Iyer from P Guru's channel. Sir, thank you so much for joining me. And I've heard you, as I was telling you before, I've heard you talking about this in multiple of your shows, and I thought I'll just want to collate all that and get your inputs as to what is exactly happening.
Thank you so much. Hello to all your viewers. Adi, it's a pleasure and honor to be on your show. See, these people, they all follow the same playbook, and that transcends countries. What is happening in US is now beginning. This has been perfected in United Kingdom. If you look at UK, how some of these groups have gone about doing their business, you can see very clearly that they have targeted. And Adi, the interesting thing here is the core group that works on all these things is primarily from the country of Pakistan, and they have managed to brainwash some Indian Muslims also in this, and some Bangladeshi Muslims. All these people come together and start bashing India. Unfortunately, a lot of pseudo seculars who don't understand their plot jump in and think that they are making a big contribution, and these people are really what people used to call funnily as the ABCDs, American born confused desis, and they also queer the pitch quite a bit. And almost all of them, to a person, have very little or very shallow understanding of Sanatana Dharma, except to say that you have crores of gods. And they don't understand the deeper meaning, the scientificness of the Dharma. There is no religion here, there is only Sanatana Dharma. And what it literally translates to is an eternal way. There are many meanings to the word dharma, and the one that closest to describing the lifestyle that used to exist in Bharatvarsh. In fact, I would say before 0 BC, that was what it was across the world, because you keep seeing murtis come up in various places. As far west as even Lithuania, you'll suddenly see some murtis come up. If you look at the Latin grammar, it is very close to Sanskrit. If you look at Lithuanian, it's very close to Sanskrit. And English, French, Spanish, all Italian, all these are derived from Latin. Just like from Sanskrit, you have all these Oriental languages, including Khmer, which is the one that used to be in Kampuchea. So we are really the basis, the foundation of thought, dharmic thought. What is the purpose of a human being's life on earth, and what is it that one's supposed to do? And they have tried to explain why time is cyclical, and these things are pretty foreign to Abrahamic religions, and that's where the conflict happens. And they add to that some people's notion that the entire world should be one way or the other. I'm including both. Christianity wants to have the entire world as being Christian, and Muslims, Islam wants the entire world to be Islamic, and this is where the whole problem is. And I think the again, the arbiter or the judge here is the Sanatani, who understands all these things, and he says, listen, these are just subshoots or offsets of what used to be already there. And you need to look back a little bit more deeper into the purpose of life as a human being on earth. This is where the confusion comes.
That's interesting, sir, because you've given a very historical perspective of the problem as per se. What we see it actually showcasing itself as today. People don't talk about the cultural differences or the civilizational challenge that exists in the world. What people talk about is basically globalism, politics and globalism, and that's something that we are seeing coming in front of us. So we see a narrative with regards to the politics which is different. We see a narrative with regards to these globalism chariots or globalists, as people like to call it, different. Now, how does that kind of balance itself out? Because it's a confusing situation.
Absolutely. And you see, what we have to look at is how the West allowed China to prosper and flourish. It happened right under their watch. and now China is too big, and they are not able to constrain it. So whatever they learned there, it looks like they are trying to apply it to India. And for India, that magic mark where you can no longer be pushed around, bullied around, or be asked to take some lumps is $5 trillion economy. It's a number that is not arbitrarily chosen, because the reason is a $5 trillion economy is not something that is easily achievable for any other country. I mean, you take the next most populated country, it will take them a lot longer to get to that $5 trillion mark than India. So, so what happens is you have all these entrenched forces. You take pharma, for example. The pharma companies, when COVID came along, everybody had the vaccines on a certain paradigm, certain fundamentals, which is called as mRNA. And lo and behold, an Indian startup comes up with something that is much more traditional vaccine based. And as the variants morph, it is noticed that the Indian vaccine is doing much better. Now, the others don't have time to now switch courses and try to become what they used to be, using the traditional methods. They're plowing on their own way. So now what happens is one of them is going to fail. Now, so what happens is, why take it to that level? Why don't you stop Covaxin from being accepted in many countries? That's what you've seen. It's a naked way to try and stop the progress or the march of Covaxin. I'm glad that India has put its might behind this product, because India has a very good chance to lead in pharma, just because it can produce pharma at a fraction of the price at which the West produces. So that is the one big challenge for the West. And once somebody decodes the chemical decomposition and comes up with a lower cost product, it's game over. So Pfizer has tried to make some, put some guardrails, if you will, around these generic companies such as Reddy Labs. But I think that's a temporary measure, and I think something like Covaxin is going to blow the gates wide open. I think there is a bigger conspiracy. I don't want to go into that, about why the world, especially Bill Gates Foundation, was pushing for vaccines so hard. And I'll get into trouble. You'll get into trouble if I tell you all the things. So we'll just leave it at that. So the pharma industry in the world wants to move to vaccines. They don't want to go into medication. They don't want to give you a flu shot or a flu medication. They would rather give you a flu shot, which is like a vaccine. Anyway, so that is one challenge. The other challenge is that politics-wise, they've been used to kind of making India toe its line, whether it was first it was the United Kingdom, then it became Russia, and lately you're seeing more and more an influence from United States and perhaps a few Middle Eastern countries also, who are trying to tell India, you should do this way, this way. But Modi is his own man. He doesn't listen to anyone. He listens to all the sides and he makes up his mind. And then he takes that middle path. I mean, initially I was not very happy about the fact that India decided to stay its own course and or abstain in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, because I foresaw some challenges down the pipeline. However, the fact that India stayed with Russia meant that India got cheap crude, which meant that India could keep a lid on the base price of all the commodities, which is transportation price, which is directly connected with the crude, right? So because of that, India is now at 6 to 7% inflation, whereas US, United Kingdom, Europe, these are all upwards of 12 to 15%. So it's a really, really, 15% inflation, that is not core inflation. That doesn't have energy and food costs. And if you add that, it is much, much higher. So India has managed to put a lid on it just because of that one decision. Well, in the long run, if that's going to help or not, we don't know. At the same time, what India is doing is something that the West is not expecting. But I think, Adi, in the next few years, it's going to be easier and easier for India to decide on its own and have its own direction. This is my doctrine, Modi doctrine, if you will, where they keep this strategic ambiguity. Sometimes they'll vote with the West, sometimes they'll abstain. They're not voting with the bloc, the Russia-China bloc. but they're at least abstaining from that. I think this is a good way to keep people guessing a little bit. And at the same time, one concern that I do have, Adi, is if there is a conflict with a neighbor or neighbors and a half, if you will, Afghanistan being thrown in, that's when India will need some really, really strong friendship. They'll have to go and get the help of the West. That's where the problem will come. That is what is the what is that's what is Modi giving up right now.
I guess that's the reason behind the balance, sir. Uh,
Yes.
Interestingly, sir, you picked up the Russia-Ukraine war, and one tends to believe the entire global world order got shifted twice in the past, I would say, 5 years. Uh, the first one is
Can you
can
hear?
you hear
Can
me?
you say something? Yeah, I
Okay,
got it back. For
no
some
problem.
reason, my Bluetooth went into sleep. Very apologies. So just
No,
start
no
from the
worries.
question. Yeah, just
Yeah,
from
yeah,
the
yeah.
question again. Yeah.
Yes, sir. So you mentioned the Russia-Ukraine war, interestingly, and one tends to kind of realize that there has been a shift in the global world order twice in the past 5 years, which doesn't happen. Once it happened when COVID, and we saw a whole narrative about India and India's mishandling of COVID in quotes. Um, the second now comes to the Russia-Ukraine war, where India, as you said, has charted its own course. A lot of people, I mean, today India has come up in this Ukraine war is a centrist state, wherein we are able to actually swing the narrative the way we want it to, and probably that is something which is new. Is there a certain, for the lack of a better word, frustration in terms of India not towing the line? Is there a certain negativity or disappointment within the West that you see at from your perspective, sir?
There was that India was not towing their line. If you remember, the then British Foreign Secretary Liz Truss paid a visit to India, trying to convince India that India should support Ukraine. Remember that? So,
Absolutely,
so,
sir.
so she was just one of the many other heads of state that came visiting and said that India should really reconsider its position and not abstain. And yeah, India is the one country that always brings back its students wherever they are, or its citizens wherever they are marooned or stuck. And this is a policy that India does as a routine. And even though nobody takes India's permission before going out to seek a job in a troubled region. But when there is real trouble, India always comes to their help. I wish more people, say thank you to the government when they are brought home safe and sound. It's like, oh, I'm home now. And then what they say is, oh, is the war over? Can I go back? That's the only thing that people think about. They don't think about, was it worth it? Can I do the same thing here or do something else, which is more rewarding because India is a peaceful place. But the frustration did grow. At the same time, the United States, well, I mean, the West as a bloc listens to what United States says. They felt that even though India was being neutral, it was strictly being neutral. It was telling you, US, I'm sorry, Russia, to stop the fight. Nobody else did. Nobody else
Mm.
had the gall or stood up to Putin and said, "Listen, you should stop this war now." Modi did. And again, West understood that India really meant that war is not good for anyone. And
True.
that kind of statesmanship is now beginning to be understood by people because what has happened now? UK is on the brink of a disaster, another new government in the making in the next week or so. And you're seeing Italy go weird right, and then you will see France go that way, maybe some other countries also. But that doesn't really solve the core problem. The core problem is all these European countries, US excluded, have stopped growing population wise. There is a demographic dividend, and they're all aging populations, and they don't have enough, you know, generation of children from the bottom up. So the rate of growth has come considered. You need to have 2.1%. I think it's 2.1 is a replacement rate, if I
Replacement.
remember. For every couple, you need to have 2.1 children.
Yes.
And I think that is down to one or even less than that in some countries, including Russia. So this is a disaster in the making. And India, on the other hand, I think is at 2.4, if I'm not wrong, overall for the country. And as far as if you take religions, it's different. There are some concerns about the majority religion, which is less than 2.1. But that's a problem that can be solved. It's not something that is hugely insurmountable. So India has stood and they have actually garnered respect. Again, I said the one problem that India will have is what happens if both countries decide to attack and both are nuclear, and if something like that happens, what will India do? At that point of time, they'll need to get some arms and serious arms and ammunition in a hurry, and who will come to their help and at what conditions, what are the terms and conditions they are going to set. Ukraine is bankrupt, so they got nothing to lose. So US is just saying, okay, I'll give you as much money as I want because we need to stop Russia,
Yeah.
right? On the other hand, China, even if it invades and takes some territory of India, right, it can't rule India. We are two independent, free thinkers. It's not Hong Kong, which that they gobbled up and said, here, it's now completely integrated into China. Even one village in Arunachal Pradesh is going to fight. They're not going to let go. And this is where the challenge is. In fact, I would be so bold to say that the Chinese army is probably just as vulnerable as its population as far as being resistant to COVID. So by contact, they could be getting into a lot of trouble. So we'll have to wait and see.
Absolutely. There's a lot more happening within China than them focusing on a war right now. So I guess there'll be much higher perspectives coming across with the re-anointment, if I may, of Xi Jinping. So I guess. But so I want to actually take the pressure tactics as per se. We see the Western media today again combined with, as you mentioned, certain Middle Eastern countries which regularly do this. And we see, the Pulitzer Prize being used. We've seen these things happening before. The impact of these pressure tactics was different. During COVID times, we saw when something like this would happen, there would be a riot across, I mean, in literal, not in a literal word, but a riot of information flowing across the country. India has been targeted and this and that and the other. Today, how do you see that pressure tactics again, sitting from your perspective in the United States? How is India dealing with it?
Many Westerners have stopped reading their usual newspapers, the BBC for radio, the Guardian as a newspaper in the United Kingdom, or the New York Times or Washington Post. These are all media publications in trouble. They are no longer profitable. So they rely on people giving them funding to write or set a narrative in a certain way. Ergo toolkit, that's what it is. Somebody sits in the lab room, in an engine room, comes up with the toolkits. They make sure that the language sounds British English for UK consumption, American English for American consumption. You get the idea, right? So but the underlying thing is every one of them knows that 2024 is the last time that they can stop this BJP juggernaut from rolling along. Because after 2024, trust me when I say this, Adi, the special status that was enjoyed by some minorities in India, that's going to go away. Everybody is going to say, same line, go at the end of the queue. Everybody is the same. This message is, without being conveyed in so many words, is being felt. And this is a problem for some, because once everybody in India starts thinking, I'm an Indian first, right? Then all these, fomentations, the things that they keep, creating trouble, all those things will go away. India will be unfettered, it will be free, it can grow at a much faster pace. Today, in just one click, India became a net importer of copper from being a net exporter. Just because a few motivated individuals, with the help of church and their funding, could effectively say that the groundwater is being polluted in Toothukudi, and they stopped the Sterlite factory from functioning. It's now 3, 4, 5 years, I think, and it still hasn't been reopened. And it's unfortunate. These kinds of things should not be allowed. And because there was no basis, that's why. If there was pollution, then that should have been controlled. But there was no pollution. There was no groundwater pollution. This was just made up. Make some story, get somebody who will tell the way you want it, and just run with that, and there is always the New York Times and others to amplify that. So this part will go away. In my opinion, 2024, maybe by August, you'll start seeing some more rapid changes where the country becomes more as uh, a country of many religions rather than uh, the minorities are having some special benefits. That should not be the way.
So, I spoke about the centrality of India. Going forward, we are going into winters, and we all know what's going to happen in Europe. We know there's going to be bad effects within America as well. Canada is bracing for winters. We know UK, as you mentioned, is probably the fastest turnaround of prime minister since somewhere late 1800s. So
Right, right.
it's interesting to see because the people are telling their governments you're doing the wrong thing, but their persistence on their train line, if I may use that word phrase loosely, is just there's no breaks. Now, when you see the whole downturn within the West, how does India kind of figure out how to take benefit from this? Because there's going to be targeting as well as opportunities, both. Because once somebody sees, yeah, I'm sitting in the cold, here are these damn Indians who are sitting comfortably. So there's going to be a little bit of regret plus and realization of an opportunity. So how do you see these two things balancing out this winter, especially, sir?
If India takes care of one thing, just one thing, then India will start growing so much faster with so much more broad-based growth that suddenly it'll crash through the 5 trillion barrier. But it's not an easy one to do. That is to induce or encourage its NRIs to come back and start whatever they are doing in the country of current residents to come back to India and do what they were doing to try and bring India up. For that, a situation where the licensing is very easy. You don't have 4 inspectors knocking on your door every day. Those kinds of things have to happen. I don't know when that will happen and which state will step up to the plate and say, I will do it for you. By the way, Adi, many people were saying that, oh, the two top men are from Gujarat. See how the semiconductor industry is gone to Gujarat. The one that is between Vedanta and Flex something.
Foxconn, sir.
Foxconn, right. Foxconn. Now, Foxconn is a contract manufacturer. It's a very, very big contract manufacturer. What has Foxconn got to do with semiconductors and semiconductor fabs? Well, it turns out that the chief scientist of TSMC, or I should say the ex-chief scientist of TSMC, is going to be joining Foxconn soon. So essentially, Foxconn is creating a new path for itself. Instead of just manufacturing somebody's product like the iPhone for Apple, they are wanting to do something more where they say, okay, we will also help you make your own chip, and here is our fab. So if you were Modi, Adi, I want to put you in his shoes, okay? And if you were Modi, and semiconductor fab is serious business for 5-10 years, you will not see a dime of return on investment. You have to keep on patiently putting the thing in. You'll be perfecting the processes. Some will work, some will not work. We cannot despair. So there'll be up days, there'll be down days, but you want to keep going until you become profitable. Show me one state in India where Modi can reliably say, okay, if I have these guys come and invest here, then I know I can control all the variables. Hence Gujarat. See, this is something that people are not understanding. Gujarat doesn't have the intellectual manpower in the sense that it doesn't have 10 universities like Bengaluru or Chennai have. At the same time, what it is that he can control the variables much better in Gujarat than any other place.
Stability.
Yeah. So that is the most important thing in this kind of long range investment. That's the same reason why Modi has the first bullet train start from Ahmedabad and go to Mumbai. See, he's trying to shift the center of gravity of a lot of the financial market from Mumbai, away from Mumbai. Why? It has become untenable. I have been writing and talking and lamenting about the kind of things that have been happening in the National Stock Exchange, the only stock exchange standing, and how these guys have siphoned retail money, plus they have taken out money from various banks and had people invest in stocks. So the only way you can fix all this stuff is by hitting the reset button and coming up with something that will not fall for the same problems as the NSE and the BSE have. And
True.
again, gift city is coming up in Gujarat. You see the point here. I mean, you can say anything you want. Oh, thing goes to Gujarat first. No, he wants to show something to the rest of the country. Listen, I did this, and here are the results. Same thing he's doing with UP also. A lot of the UP bhayas are not going back to Mumbai in search of work because they can find work in UP.
Yeah.
Bihar is not there yet. Maybe in a few years, when there's a BJP only government there, the same thing will happen in Bihar too. Already seeing the changes in Northeast. See, these are all big ships. I may criticize Modi on some specific policy, but I'm very happy with the overall thing that he's doing. You take a step back and look at how India is progressing. It is progressing forward, sometimes faster, sometimes slower, but it is not stopping, and it's definitely not reversing.
Actually, to add to what you're saying, that even the defense industry is again in UP and Gujarat, which is coming up.
Yes.
The Def Expo is on as we speak, so that's the huge orders which are coming out there, sir. Uh, Sir, my last question to you, and thank you, for putting this out in a very, very beautiful way. But one thing that I see missing completely, and let me just say this to start with: there are people like you who are doing a fantastic job putting the India narrative out. We don't see that happening anywhere else. We don't see an India channel. We don't see an India news outlet. We don't see an India writing sort of a thing. We don't see our writers being able to publish the right narrative in Washington Post or any other journal for that matter, which really, where is the Indian narrative and how does that need to be built up? One man
You know,
cannot do that, sir.
Adi, here's the answer to your problem. So if a good kabaddi player is being asked to play cricket, he's not going to succeed, right? Today, the kabaddi is the social media platform, whether it is YouTube, the one that you and I are doing now, or it's platforms like Reddit and uh, Telegram or WhatsApp and so on. This is where you are going to find new authors and new ideas from India come out and being absorbed by the world. The world is looking for solutions. Many of us, I'm talking about in the West, they are trying to answer that essential problem that Sanatana Dharma answers. What am I on this earth for? Even as Christianity is trying to spread across the lesser developed countries, it's losing ground in the most advanced countries. People don't go to church. They don't pray to God. They don't believe they are Christians. They are all ex-Christians. They just became like, I wouldn't say atheists, but they just say, I don't think that I need to do all these things. I don't need to do sabbatical. I don't need to do bar mitzvah. You get the idea, right? So at the same time, everybody at some point of time, when they have a lot of money, but they don't have health, or some such thing where then that's when you come up and say, like, what is the meaning of life? If you had understood a little bit more, and this includes me too, what exactly did our Vedas say? What exactly did our Upanishad say? What does Bhagavad Gita say? The saransh, the understanding, the crux. What is it? It's search for the truth. What is it
The
that you are here for? Right?
quest for knowledge.
Quest for knowledge, right? So this is what the world should understand that India has, and it has it in abundance. Look at Steve Jobs' success story. Look at Mark Zuckerberg's success story. They both came looking for a Neem Karoli Baba, one specific Swami, and they drew their inspiration from listening to him, being with him. So I don't know where Elon Musk gets his inspiration. Today he's considered like the Steve Jobs version 2.0. But at least you have two big successful technopreneurs who went back to the basics to understand how they can channel their inner energy. This is what India can give to the whole world. And from time to time you get people who come in and spread that thing. Today there is the Gurudev Sri Ravi Shankar, Art of Living. Through meditation he's trying to do it. Then you have also Isha Foundation, Vasudev, Jaggi Vasudev. He's also doing it. So you get these people, they can tell you what the meaning of life is in the words that you understand. And this is spreading. But we need to have more Sri Sris, more Jaggi Vasudevs, because the world needs it more now than at any other time before.
Absolutely, sir. Indeed, the point that you put across is very, very interesting. When I compare it to what the Chinese are doing in terms of the Confucius Institutes, one finds India to be a very small game. But is it that, and just the final point, is it that we are playing the small and slow game because it's a steady game?
Not really. I think India's focus, even today, India doesn't lobby much in the West
Yeah.
because they feel that we are a transparent democracy. Some people say we are not a functioning democracy, but be that as it may, India is something just like the United States is, and they feel like they don't need to have somebody to be told or spoon fed the truth. Whereas the other side, having been set on a bed of lies, they need to keep going and
Leadership.
creating waves as opposing that, and keep saying that India is persecuting its minorities, whereas the opposite is the truth. you know Adi, there's a simple solution to this: break Pakistan into four parts, okay, and three of them should be under India's protection for defense, and maybe some other things, like for example use Indian currency, but they administer it themselves. We don't want them to come in, but at least take care of the two basic things. Things will become all right. There'll be this small landlocked island called Punjab, which will become the reduced Pakistan, and they will figure out what it is, because that is, to me, is the trouble spot. That is the trouble spot. Once this becomes okay, a lot of things will fall in place. Believe me when I say this thing, this is a solution. And in fact, I would not even be surprised if India takes a part of Sindh also and annexes it to Gujarat and Rajasthan and so on. The reason being that it needs to create a buffer zone, and the way it is now is probably not the best way. The buffer zone needs to be along the river of Indus. Anyway,
Yeah.
that's just my thought. A lot of people are thinking about this, by the way. If it breaks, it's not going to be like just one entity breaking into four parts, but there will be some pieces that will go missing. Baluchistan will probably get free first.
Indeed, sir. There's a lot happening within our neighbor, and which one doesn't understand, and their sudden love with the West is also a little curious. But anyways, thank you so much, sir, for putting your perspective across. And I think in a certain way that you've generated a India narrative in a very nice way, with regards to dharma, with regards to the position of India, and with regards to the standing that India has across the world today. Grateful to you, sir, and I look forward for many more interactions. Till then, sir. Jai Hind.
Thank you very much. And viewers, do support Adi. Adi Achan is one of those rare people who gives you very, patient hearing. Some of the ideas he may not be in agreement with, but he rarely comes in and stops you or rebuts you or anything. A very, very free flowing conversation today. Thank you so much, Adi. And I look forward to coming back and sharing my views with your viewers. Namaskar.
Thank you, sir.